Good evening, I'm Hugh Downs.
And I'm Barbara Walters, and this is 2020.
On the ABC News Magazine, 2020 with Hugh Downs and Barbara Walters.
Tonight, she was an unknown beauty from Miami. He could have been the next president of the United States. Together, they became a worldwide sensation. And tonight, Barbara has the first interview with Donna Rice.
People have been pulling and tugging at me. Everybody wants to give me advice. Everybody wants to get a piece of me.
She goes on the record, her relationship with Gary Hart.
Did you know that he was married?
Not at first, no.
Did you ask him?
The scene when they discovered they were being followed.
Everything was very rushed. It was a panic situation.
After 7 weeks of second-hand accounts,
Is this what people want to hear? Is this what people want to see?
Barbara gets the story from Donna Rice.
And from the people who brought us a day in the life of America comes a day in the life of the Soviet Union.
Russians are as much amazed by this as we are.
The world's top photographers set loose in the Soviet Union. They covered 11 times dozens of cities, all walks of life, in one 24-hour period. And John Stossel kept up with the pace. A day in the life of the Soviet Union.
Well, first, Donna Rice. I don't think I'd want to have anybody have to wait for this one. You have some story here.
Well, before we hear from Donna Rice, perhaps we should go back to the first weekend in May, which helped bring about the downfall of Gary Hart. At that time, of course, only a handful of people knew that he had any kind of relationship with Donna Rice. And
whoever these people were who did know, and Donna Rice talks to Barbara about that, one of them contacted the Miami Herald, and it put a tail on Donna Rice. Reporters followed her to Gary Hart's Washington townhouse, and by Sunday morning, the airwaves were filled with the story that ran in the Miami Herald.
It reports this morning a young woman flew up from Miami to meet Hart, spent the night with him in his house in Washington. Hart says nothing happened, that she's only the friend of a friend.
But then came news of their overnight trip to Miami, from Miami to Bimini, on a yacht called Monkey Business. Hart had to backtrack. The character issue had come to a head, and he dropped out of the race. Donna Rice, a young woman with acting ambitions, became the unseen star of a political soap opera. Aside from a brief essay, which was mostly about her childhood, which she wrote for Life magazine, she's been unavailable to the press and has granted no interviews until tonight.
There's probably nobody in this country who by now hasn't seen a picture of Donna Rice in a bathing suit, wouldn't you say? Okay. A lot of people probably feel that she's been cashing in on all the publicity. The truth is that she was paid $4,000 for the brief Life magazine piece in which she barely mentions Gary Hart. And that money is a standard writer's fee for Life. She received no payment at all for this interview.
And I think people would like to know, Barbara, just how this interview came about.
Well, she did not solicit it. I called her. She had been in virtual seclusion, not talking to anyone, and she said that she was too distraught and that she was physically ill and she couldn't even think about talking publicly. But gradually, I think she decided that maybe this was the only way to let people know what she was like and have them judge for themselves. This week, she came to New York under an assumed name. We talked in a New York hotel room. And one day, perhaps Gary Hart may tell his side. Here now is her side. This is Donna Rice. No one could have been more all-American than Donna Rice growing up. She took dancing lessons, was a Girl Scout, and starred in church plays. Donna was not only popular, but at the top of her class.
An A wasn't good enough. It had to be the top A, you know, the top grade in the class. I was just very competitive with myself.
And it was that drive to be the best that pushed her to graduate magna cum laude from the University of South Carolina, where she majored in biology. She was not only smart, but pretty, a beauty queen. And after graduation, she decided to go to New York to try to break into modeling and acting. She had very little success with her acting career and moved to Miami, where she thought the competition would be less. There, she got work.
The type of commercials that I was cast in, I was always seen as the girl next door, the young mom, the young housewife, and my image is not perceived that way, I don't think, anymore. And most of the commercials I've done have been put on hold or canceled.
The moment Donna Rice's name surfaced, the public was barraged with pictures of Donna Rice in bathing suits. There was no trace of that girl-next-door image that had been her trademark in the modeling and commercial world.
There's not a model in Florida that does not have pictures in their portfolio in a bathing suit. Starting out, you do a lot of testing and that kind of thing, and in most of the tests you never even use. Most of the pictures I've seen are rejected test shots, a model's nightmare. And
you mean the photographers just kept them, and suddenly when this happened they said, wow, I've got Donna Rice pictures?
Exactly. It's unethical to do that without a model's release, and there was never a model's release.
You did not sign you did not sign releases for all of those pictures?
No. They were out there without my knowledge until I saw them.
And with all the media attention, another fact about Donna Rice seemed to get buried. During her years in Miami, she had also worked full-time, 5 days a week as a saleswoman for a pharmaceutical company called Wyatt Laboratories.
I call on doctors, pharmacies, hospitals. I'm in and out of offices all day long. I represent the natology division, which is basically gynecological products, infant formula products, pediatric products, antibiotics. And it's very competitive, and you really have to stay on your toes to do well.
So when do you model or act?
The acting is done on my own time, so I work double time. I'm always working. Everyone says, oh, you always work. It's true, I do.
So when you're called a party girl, what do you think? Which is the way you've been described.
Yeah, it's very inaccurate. I don't have time, I don't have the energy. When I have the time, I'm pooped.
I read about Adnan Khashoggi, Prince Albert of Monaco,
right.
Don Henley. I mean, celebrities, billionaires, royalty.
Right.
Tell me about them.
What do you want to know?
Well, Khashoggi. You were on Khashoggi's yacht? Yeah.
Once.
Met him once.
Years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Prince Albert of Monaco?
Mm-hmm. Had a blind date with him. We're still friends.
In other words, what happens, what you're saying is, if you did something once, if anybody knew that you ever dated anybody, that's what's come out. But
Exactly.
that's not the fabric of your life.
No, not at all. Not at all. Most of my friends are very regular, down-to-earth, professional people, not in the limelight, but their names don't sell papers, so you don't hear about them.
Well, let's trace a little bit of what's happened the last few months. Aspen. You go to Aspen over Christmas.
I'm an avid snow skier.
You're young, you're pretty, and you go to a party at Don Henley's house, rock star Don Henley.
Right.
Right? Was he a particular date, friend, what?
I've dated him, yes.
Okay. And at the party, you're introduced to Gary Hart.
I met him there, yeah.
Did you know who he was?
Didn't really pay much attention. There were so many people there, and we were involved in serving food and whether or not there were enough glasses and that kind of a thing. Just...
So it wasn't a big deal?
It wasn't a big deal.
There was one more hello, hello?
Exactly, yeah.
The next time you met him, Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me how?
Yes. Some friends that I was with, we left a party to go onto a boat owned by a friend of ours and didn't know it was chartered, and found out when we walked on the boat that it was chartered. And he was one of the individuals on the boat.
Well, you went to a place called Turnberry. Tell us what it is.
It's a yacht club, and a friend of ours keeps a boat there, and it's stocked out front most of the time. And we decided to go onto the boat.
And there is?
And there he is, yeah.
And you said?
I was embarrassed that we had invaded their privacy. That's the way I felt. And said so, but had recalled meeting him briefly in Aspen and just, you know, rehashed that whole thing. And we had a few laughs.
But it was just coincidence that you
Yes.
went
Yeah,
there.
it
Okay.
was.
Gary Hart invited Donna to take a cruise on the boat, that boat being the now famous Monkey Business. He, Donna, her friend Lynn Armont, whom she had known for 3 months, and a Hart fundraiser by the name of William Broadhurst left for what was to have been a day trip to the island of Bimini. But the group stayed overnight and returned the next day. Did you know that he was married?
Not at first, no.
Did you ask him?
Yes.
And he said,
Yes.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you feel? What'd you think? Or did you already have kind of a crush at that point?
I really didn't know what to think. We just didn't discuss it.
You had not met his wife in Aspen?
No.
Donna, when you were on the yacht, there were pictures taken of you sitting in Gary Hart's lap, of all of you singing together.
Mm-hmm.
How were they taken? Who took them?
Lynn Armont took them. And she encouraged the taking of photographs. And,
Come on, why don't you and Gary...
exactly.
Why don't
Yeah.
you sit in his
Yeah.
lap? Was that her idea?
Yeah.
Why don't you sit in his lap?
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she took the pictures.
Yeah. I didn't think anything about it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it was my camera,
And then
my film.
it was your
Yeah.
camera, your film. Then what happened to the pictures?
I had them developed, and she kept asking me for prints. And I said, well, I really don't, want to get them developed again. And she wanted to show her boyfriend. So I lent her a copy and never saw him again.
Until
the Inquirer.
the National Enquirer published
Yeah.
them. The pictures that you had given to Lynn Armont.
Lent to Lynn Armont.
Lent to Lynn. Lynn Armont got paid for selling the pictures to the National Enquirer.
Exactly. And a story, I believe, too, right?
Story, too. In that story, it was said that Gary Hart had told you that you would be First Lady, that he needed someone young, and that you said something like, I'm going to be the First Lady.
I was livid when I read that. I can't believe that type of journalism. And I can't believe that anybody else can believe that type of journalism.
I have to ask you, any truth to it?
No.
Any kind of a conversation anywhere near like that?
You think I'm a moron? I mean, of course not, no.
When the pictures were being taken, did you say to yourself at all, this is a presidential candidate, my goodness, maybe these will get him in trouble? Did it go through your mind?
Not really. He didn't seem to be concerned. And, all the pictures were taken in public places.
So,
And, yeah, he hadn't announced his candidacy at that time.
after that weekend, Gary Hart called Donna on several occasions, and a month later, she and her friend, Lynn Armont, visited him at his Capitol Hill townhouse in Washington, D.C. How many people knew that you were going to go to Washington?
I'm not sure how many people knew.
How many people did you tell?
2 friends in Miami, or I'm not sure how good of friends they were, but 2 people in Miami I told.
Who were they?
Lynn and another girl whose name, I don't know, has been brought up, so.
Lynn Armont told you a story, or the story, in People magazine and mentioned another friend, Dana Weems.
Right, she knew.
Those were the only 2 people whom you had told?
Right,
Lynn Armont and Dana Weems.
right.
You
And
didn't tell
knew,
other people who knew you were going to Washington?
who knew
when you
that
were-
I was definitely going to Washington.
Are you aware that when the anonymous phone call first came to the political editor of the Miami Herald, it was from a female, and she said that she was selling pictures of Gary Hart and a Miami actress together on a yachting trip. That was the first phone call. Did you know that?
I didn't know it at the time.
But you heard that later?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, who had those pictures to sell?
Only one person. Lynn Armont had a set of prints.
That was the only other set of prints.
That was it.
Who had the negatives?
I had the negatives, so I know who had a set of prints.
What might have been her motivation?
Well, assuming that she made the call, could it have been like petty jealousy or cattiness? I don't know. I have no idea.
When you go back and you think of the pictures that were then sold and so forth, does part of you say, maybe I've been set up?
Yep. Yeah, I thought that. I hate to think that, but it certainly seems that way.
Donna, are you aware that there are some people who thought that you might have called the Miami Herald because you wanted the publicity?
I've heard that, and it's just so absurd. Publicity, there's been lots of publicity, but it's negative. It's negative publicity. Who wants negative publicity?
After you came to Washington, the rest, as they say, is history.
Right.
But what everybody wants to know, of course, Donna, is whether it was aboard the yacht, the Monkey Business, or in Washington, is Did you share a room? Did you sleep with Gary Hart? Lynn Armont in People magazine writes about it, gives her opinion, which is that you did.
Yeah, she was paid a lot of money to say that, too.
Do you want to answer me?
No, I don't want to answer you. The reason is because it's a question of dignity. Whether I did, whether I didn't, with Gary Hart or anybody else, I wouldn't answer it one way or the other.
When we come back, Donna Rice tells us how she feels about Gary Hart, whether he's tried to contact her, and what all this has done to her life. That and more when Barbara's interview with Donna Rice continues right after this.
You're watching 2020 with 7 on your side.
2020, brought to you by the 1987 Ford cars, each a result of Ford's continuing commitment to quality. Have you driven a Ford lately?
Although Donna Rice will not say whether or not she shared a room with Gary Hart, and I guess the truth is that only she and Gary Hart know exactly what happened, her ex-girlfriend, Lynn Armont, not only sold the pictures of Donna Rice and Gary Hart taken on the yacht, she also sold her version of the Donna Rice story to People magazine for a sum reported to be $125,000. In that piece, Lynn Armont says that Donna Rice did not share a room with her, and she assumes that Donna was sleeping with Gary Hart. We asked Donna about Lynn Armont's statements. How did you feel then when you saw Lynn Armont writing about you, saying that you did, implying that you did?
She was obviously paid a large sum of money for that story and for other stories, or another story that she sold. And I think people will say anything for money. It's an invasion of my privacy. I wonder if she has thought how she would feel if it had been turned around. It's a real slap in the face, stab in the back, salt poured in an open wound. I'd already been beaten to death already by the press. Things were just starting to die down, and then all of a sudden this.
Was it accurate, her story?
No, I won't even give credence to that story.
Would you have grounds to sue?
My lawyer says I have grounds to sue, yes. I don't know that I will. When the time comes for me to make that decision, I'll make the best decision I can based on what I know.
After the reporters came, Lynn Armont says that Gary Hart was very brusque. Suddenly, you know, this terrible thing happens, and it's just, boy, get out of the scene.
Everything was very rushed. It was a panic situation, and a lot of confusion.
Was he brusque? Did he worry about you?
He seemed to be concerned about the entire situation, yeah.
You too?
Concerned about me?
Mm-hmm.
I guess you'd have to ask him that.
How did you get out of there? How did you leave? How did you get away?
Out the back door. Yeah.
To where?
Went to Bill Broadhurst. Bill got on the phone. I believe he even left and talked to the people with the Herald. Mm-hmm. And Lynn went to sleep, and I stayed up and worried all night.
Did you then go back to Miami?
Yeah.
Alone?
No, someone traveled with me from the campaign. And from that day, for about a week, I did not see a single soul I knew. None of my friends could get near me. I couldn't get near any of my friends.
What do you mean?
I was so hounded by the press, I couldn't even get my car from the airport, you know? There were 50 to 75 reporters and camera crews outside of my building. All I wanted to do was be left alone. And nobody's left me alone since.
When you heard that Gary Hart was no longer going to be a presidential candidate, how'd you feel?
I feel it's a tragedy. This whole thing's been a tragedy. Don't quite understand it. I'm responsible for my own actions, and I admit that there's been a lack of judgment on my part, and I would have admitted that whether this ever came to light or not. So many people have been hurt. My family, myself, I'm sure Gary Hart and his family, all of his supporters and people that believed in him, people who believed in me. I mean, it's awful to see someone that you care about being ripped apart by the press and being sensationalized and exploited. I mean, it has not been pleasant at all.
Did you feel guilty?
No, I didn't feel guilty.
Did you feel, on the other hand, hey, this is a sophisticated man and a political candidate, and maybe his lack of judgment got me in this mess? Did you feel any anger?
By the way, that's what all my friends are saying. Yeah. I didn't feel that. I don't feel anger towards any one person, any one factor, not even the press. I guess it's just kind of the way of the world, you know, supply and demand. Is this what people want to hear? Is this what people want to see? You know, is this what the press feels that they have to give out? You know, there's the big question of the invasion of privacy of a public figure. But I have not heard anybody talk about the invasion of privacy of a private person who did not voluntarily step into the public arena. And that makes me angry. I don't think that the media has a right to make a private person a public person.
Well, except he was a public person, and you were the person he was involved with.
Right, but I was a private person.
You're saying they went too far.
Well, I involuntarily became a public person.
Tell me what it's done to your life. What's it been like?
You know, it has been the most difficult, painful, and humiliating experience. And it's been really tough. The most painful thing for me has been seeing what this does to my parents. They've always been so proud of me, and they've been just, it's been horrible for them, and it's been a real trial. It's been a real trial.
Have you heard from Gary Hart since this all happened?
You know, any communication would be misconstrued, and we've avoided any communication until this point.
Does that hurt you at all, that you haven't heard from him?
I think that it's to be expected, yeah.
If I said, is the relationship with Gary Hart finished, what would you say?
I would say that I don't see any reason for us to have any contact in the future, not in the near future. I just, you know, he has his family. I have my problems and my family to deal with in my life, and there's just, our contact caused too much problem to begin with, you know.
What do you think of him? What do you think of Gary Hart?
Well, I think he's a charismatic, respectable person. He's likable, he's warm, he's concerned. I think he's probably very hurt, disappointed, but he'll survive this. We'll all survive it. I'm sure of that.
How do you know who to trust anymore?
You know, that's very difficult. But one of the things that people don't realize is that people have been pulling and tugging at me. Everybody wants to give me advice. Everybody wants to get a piece of me, see dollar signs, and that's been as much of my turmoil in recent weeks.
What to do, what not to do.
What to do, what not to do, how to do it, who to trust. You don't need this person, you need that person.
You could have sold your story.
Yes, I could have.
You're not getting paid for this interview.
No.
Why not try to make some money now? You may not make any money later.
My desire through this whole thing is to approach this in a dignified manner. There's lots of money out there, lots of money to be made. that there's such a downside to that, you know, and I was concerned that it would look like I was exploiting the situation, and I would have been, I think. I mean, look at the way people perceive Lynn now.
How do you think they perceive her?
Well, I hope they perceive her the way I do. I mean, she sold Donna Rice. That's what she did. And is trying to sell bits and pieces of me to the highest bidder.
What have you learned?
Learn to think before you act. I've learned that there are consequences to things you do. I've already admitted a lack of judgment, paying a price, very handsome price. I've also learned that oftentimes other people have to pay a price as well. You know, like my family.
Is your sister younger than you?
Yes.
I'm sure she comes to you for advice now and then.
Yes, she did.
And if she came to you and said, Donna, I met this terrific guy, and he's so attractive, but he's married, what would the big sister say?
Big sister would say, Kathy, that's her name. There's a lot of single men out there. Stick with a single man.
If someone had been there to give her that good advice. I think as agonizing as this has been for her, Barbara, the other side of that coin is the career potential that must be looming. Surely offers are pouring in now.
Well, all kinds of offers are pouring in, and some of them are pretty weird. And some of them are offering her a lot of money to do some rather, well, to some people perhaps not unusual, but to her unusual things that she can't do. Now, however, she has hired an agent, a young woman named Tricia Erickson, who describes herself as a crisis manager. I love that expression. I think sometimes I could use it myself. In any event, Donna hopes that there will be acting offers. She has received book offers, but she told me that she will never discuss it. It is a matter of dignity, and she won't ever discuss whether or not she shared that room with Gary Hart or slept with him. So without this, we'll see how many, book offers there are. However, she does have her job. She does hope that there will be legitimate acting offers, and I think she does have her integrity.
And displays some of that dignity that she talks about.
I think so.
Fascinating. Thank you, Barbara. Well, next on 2020, an unprecedented access inside the Soviet Union. Some of the world's best photographers got it, and so did 2020. John Stossel captures a day in the life of the Soviet Union. Right after this. It is the largest country in the world, and it has the second largest population. But just think about how few photographs you've seen of life in the Soviet Union. Well, a few weeks ago, something happened that's going to change that. 50 Western photographers fanned out across 2 continents to capture a day in the life of the Soviet Union. You remember the book, A Day in the Life of America? Well, ABC News was there in the Soviet Union as well. And John Stossel and the 2020 crew recorded what can only be described as a happening. And that it was happening in the Soviet Union can be attributed to glasnost, the new openness, that policy recently espoused by Mikhail Gorbachev. This is a real delight, and we're very pleased to share it with you now.
These are the pictures, the symbols of the Soviet Union you usually see, in part because the news media have been restricted in what we can show you here. When we at ABC try for different images, the Soviets often stop us.
No! Don't do that.
So now they're going to let dozens of Western photographers take pictures all across their country?
The Russians are as much amazed by this as we are. They can't believe themselves the access that has been given, and they're as frightened of this whole thing as we are.
Cohen and Rick Smolin are the creators of a series of Day in the Life books. The last one, A Day in the Life of America, is a publishing phenomenon. It's on its 29th week in the bestseller lists. Making the American book was a massive project. Armies of photographers spread throughout the country to shoot all on one day. Hard enough to arrange here. Could it be done in the Soviet Union? Smolin and Cohen started asking for permission 3 years ago. The Russians didn't respond. They asked the next year and the year after that.
And they would smile and say, thank you very much, we'll get back in touch with you, and we would never hear anything. But it really wasn't until Gorbachev came to power that this was even possible at all, and it was in
Glasnost makes such things possible. In London last February, the final deal was struck between the Day in the Life publishers and Novosti, a Soviet government news agency. Among the conditions, 100 photographers would be allowed to shoot for the project. 50 from the Soviet bloc, 50 from the West. Last month, a contingent from the West arrived at Moscow's airport. It was 5 days before shoot day, May 15th. Among them, Pulitzer Prize winners like David Kennerly and Eddie Adams. They and their colleagues are some of the best in the business of photojournalism. Most of them would soon leave Moscow by car, train, and Aeroflot to spread out all over the Soviet Union's 11 time zones, visiting 83 different cities, many shooting places which were off limits to foreigners until now. We couldn't follow them all because the Soviets limited ABC's cameras to 3 cities. Fortunately, Sony, one of the sponsors of the book, gave each photographer a portable video camera. So for much of this report, you'll see their home movies, movies of places most of us have never heard about.
I'm going to a town about 1,200 miles southeast of Moscow called Tolyatti. It's the Pittsburgh of Russia.
a place called Zvilzny Garodok, which I don't know if that's how you say it, but it stands for Star City.
It's in the middle of Siberia. It's called Yakutsk, and they say it's the coldest place on Earth.
No one's ever been there. No one knows anything about it, but it's a part of the Soviet Union that no American has ever been to.
May 15th, shoot day, begins in the Far East. Frank Johnston of the Washington Post is in Nakhudka, a major commercial fishing port in the Sea of Japan, to record the sunrise. Over 4,000 miles away, in Moscow, the sun rises 7 hours later. And at 5 a.m., Pulitzer Prize winner Larry Price is in Red Square to catch it. This, by the way, is where that young German pilot landed his Cessna just 2 weeks later. Later that day, at Moscow's public baths, group portrait specialist Neil Slavin found this group revealing.
What I'm most fascinated by is the total relaxation, the total sense of anonymity. I mean, you've got little kids, you've got old men. I mean, everybody comes here. Everybody. This is just a way of life.
Some people take the phrase public baths quite literally. Others use the place just to relax or to go for a swim. And take it from me,